So without further ado, I would like to introduce Linda Applegate, who is the Saro Fimbra Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School. It's all yours, Linda.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome. It's great to see all of you here, especially because this is a really exciting and important panel. We're going to be talking about women entrepreneurs. And joining me on the panel, by the way, how many of you have either thought about or founded businesses and are pursuing entrepreneurial careers? How many have actually founded? Okay, how many are thinking about it? Okay, we'll try to catch you really enthused, okay? So anyway, I've got 4 women entrepreneurs who have joined us on the panel. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then have them talk a little bit about their, just a very short background of their entrepreneurial careers and what some of the insights and challenges they've had in their careers. And then I'm going to open it up and I'll moderate, and maybe introduce some questions and themes as we go through. But I want to make sure we give you guys lots of time to talk. So our first founder is Therese Rohrbeck. She's the co-founder of Viking Icelandic Yogurt. And she founded the company and actually launched it in February 2015. Okay? She's a graduate from Harvard Law School. She'll talk a little bit about the journey from law school to yogurt.
Nice.
But she founded the company in February 2015. Now let's put a little color on that. She lives in Boston. She co-founded with her husband. She lives in Boston. The company launched in Chicago. So he's in Chicago a lot. She's here in Boston, kind of getting things going from here. And the warehouse is in New York. How many of you know what happened this February?
Snow.
Snow. Yogurt is perishable. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. So I thought that was really interesting. Beside her is Jules Pieri. Jules Pieri co-founded the Grommet with Joanne Domeniconi. And I've known Jules and Joanne for a while. I've known Jules longer. Jules is an entrepreneur in residence here at HBS. She graduated from Harvard Business School quite a few years ago. In fact, I think you graduated right before I got here. I've actually been on the faculty at the Harvard Business School in the 1980s, so 30 years now. Okay, and when I started, there weren't a lot of women. Okay, so I have to just tell you that and be very upfront. I came as part of a group that was coming to Harvard to actually bring discipline-related areas, and I was recruited to come and start our tech innovation group. I actually helped co-found and headed the entrepreneurial management unit at the school. And in that unit is where we started, and I was one of the ones that started the Entrepreneur Residence Program that Jules is now a part of. And we actually were the ones that actually started the launch of the Harvard Innovation Lab. So it's really been exciting to watch all of this get started. So Jules is an entrepreneur resident. She co-founded the Grommet with a colleague that she'd worked with for many years at StrideRite, at KEDS, etc. In fact, both of them worked for Meg Whitman at one point and were given the opportunity actually to go to eBay when Meg went there, but they went and founded their own company anyway. So she's going to talk a little bit about the Grommet, her entrepreneurial career from actually a long history of working in companies before founding her company. Beside her is Debbie Theobald. And Debbie is the co-founder of Vecna Technologies. She founded Vecna. Vecna is an IT and healthcare robotics company, and was founded 2009. Was that right? 1999. So it's been here for a while. 1999. It's got a for-profit and a not-for-profit arm. And she's in the midst right now of scaling it to take it to emerging markets. So she could talk a little bit about the healthcare, technology, bringing technology in healthcare. By the way, she graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, right? So, and then finally, we've got Stephanie Kaplan Lewis. She's the co-founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Her Campus Media. She co-founded the company while still an undergraduate here at the school. So she and her co-founders were actually undergraduates at Harvard College, founded the company then, and have really taken off. No financing, so had to go through all the issues of, do you really need to go out and work before you become an entrepreneur? Do you have to get financing and get the resources, and can you actually bootstrap it? So she'll talk about that. By the way, she's wearing her marathon jacket. So I think she needs a big round of applause. You might see her, she stands up, she's limping a little bit. She's going to stay sitting. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each woman to give you a little preview of their entrepreneurial career, some of the insights they've had, some of the challenges. Then we're just going to open it up and start the conversation, and we'll start from there. So, Therese.
Hi, thank you so much, Linda, for the introduction. Is the mic on?
You could take it and hold it.
Make sure you guys can all hear me. Is that better? Yeah. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm really excited to share our story with you. I'm Therese Mears. I graduated from Harvard Law School in 2008. And before I went to law school, I studied art history at Duke. So I've had a really different career path. But my husband and I, we officially founded Saga Dairy Inc. that produces Viking Icelandic Yogurt in January 2014, and we launched in the market February 2015. We spent a little over a year working and developing our product, from getting the recipe right, getting our packaging down, figuring out who was going to distribute, how we were going to transport it, and where we were going to sell it. A lot of work in that year, plus I got married as well, so it was very, very busy. And but we are now officially in the market, and although we are a Boston company based in Boston, founded in Boston, our sales ended up in the Midwest. So my husband's actually from Chicago, south of the city. We launched in between 3 blizzards this past winter. And we're now in over 130 grocery stores throughout the Midwest. Chicago, St. Louis are major cities, but you can find us in Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, and growing into Iowa as well. So I'd love to spend more time talking to you this evening about it.
Great. Thank you. Jules.
So the Grommet is a product launch platform. We've been launching one product a day since October 20th, 2008. I'm wearing one. Fitbit is something we launched ages ago. And my career is a combination of, I started out as an industrial designer, and a combination after that of big companies and startups. So my first startup was right out of this school, Harvard Business School. I was the only person in my class that I know of who joined a startup. It was not popular to do that in 1986. I joined a firm that's still thriving called Continuum. When you drive down the Mass Pike, you'll see it. It's an innovation consultancy. My second startup was more recently Ziggs. It was a social network that competed with LinkedIn, a professional social network that was sold to Reputation.com. Clearly, LinkedIn won. You don't know the name Ziggs. And then I started the Grommet in 2008. And then I did big company stuff. Linda alluded to that in between. So I'm an unusual entrepreneur in that way, in that although some people call me a serial entrepreneur, I've done the big company stuff. I like working for other people. It's easier than working for myself. So, you know, I can talk to that topic. And in terms of founding the Grommet, I know the insight for it for me happened in a big company. I was working at Play School for Meg Women, and I was watching how our best products never made it to market. We had great ideas, great development team. And when I would ask why, the answer was always one of four answers. Kmart, Target, Walmart, Toys R Us didn't want it. What was happening was that we were losing the specialty store and the small regional chain stores that launch toys that are really the lifeblood of innovation. And that just made me really, really mad for a really long time. And ultimately, once I ran a social network, I realized that I could actually harness a community and media and technology to solve that problem. So that's what the Grommet's been doing for 6 years.
And by the way, I wrote a case study on the Grommet. We just taught it for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was a huge success. So anybody that wants the case can get the case. Just send an email and you can get the case. Debbie.
So I was in, I guess my schooling, I went to MIT. I was core 16, aerospace engineer, and then I traveled for a little bit after that and did some graduate work at University of Maryland. And while I was there, started to get really interested in healthcare and toyed with the idea of doing an MD PhD, but that seemed way too hard. And so I thought I would just start a business. I was starting our family and things, and thought I really should have more time, to myself. So maybe it was a lot, more unstructured time, but it was definitely, I don't know, maybe I should have gone to med school and just been a doctor. Maybe it would have been a lot more structured. But no, I don't think I've actually regretted the decision. We started this in 1999, and it's like a per style going on there. That's good. And then we started off as a bootstrapping information technology company. We always knew we wanted to do robotics, but we didn't want to take all of the investment because robotics needs a lot of capital in order to start. And so looking back, hindsight, you see all the good decisions you make and all the bad decisions you make, but in the moment, you just kind of make the decisions that need to be made. I think it was really good. We got our introduction into the healthcare market. We could see a lot of the issues which were hard to see from the outside. And so as we started to develop our information technology solutions, we also saw the gaps that we could fill with robotics. So we were much better aligned when we came and showed off did our first investment in a product, and were able to get grants and to move that along, that we didn't have to take venture capital. We could sell into a market where we knew there would be some real value there. In 2009, I got bitten by the global health bug and started to see that we were meeting the needs of 10% of the world, and there was a 90% of the world that was out there that could also benefit from some better tools. And so we started Vecna Cares. And Vecna Cares adapts technology, certainly Vecna's intellectual property, our IP, for use in these areas, but we've also started to expand and incorporating other tools and to see how we can make them more useful. To really connect these rural clinics or these health facilities in these developing countries to larger resources, to give them the tools to access the power of information and to be connected to a broader network of tools and resources. So that's my path.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie, co-founder of Her Campus. As Linda mentioned, we started Her Campus as undergrads at Harvard here. So I met my two co-founders, Windsor and Annie, as undergrads working on a student publication at Harvard that was basically a lifestyle and fashion magazine for Harvard women. And we took over leadership of that magazine, and we decided to make it online so that we can publish more content and more frequently. And basically, once we put this online, we realized that college women, not just at Harvard, were reading it, but at colleges all across the country. And many of these women were writing to us and saying, I wish we had something like this at my school. I love reading Harvard's magazine, but it's all about Harvard. And there was this whole other group of college women writing to us and saying, can you give us advice on how to start something like this at our school? All we have is a school newspaper. I wish we had a lifestyle and fashion magazine like this that I could write for. So we realized that there was really kind of this hole in the market, both in terms of content that targeted college women directly. There was no other kind of media platform, either website, online, or print magazine, where college girls could read the kinds of articles that spoke directly to them, not a 17 magazine and not a glamour magazine, but something for when you're in college. And there was also this kind of unmet need of college women that wanted to go into careers in magazine journalism, who wanted to go work for Glamour or Vogue or 17 one day. But most schools really just had a school newspaper, so they couldn't get the kind of clips that they needed to apply for magazine journalism jobs just from working on the newspaper. So we kind of looked at what we were doing at Harvard and this kind of all the sort of buttons it was hitting with girls across the country, and entered the business plan competition here with our idea for Her Campus, which would be this national kind of online magazine, website, content site of sorts that would have national content as well as local content, school by school, all written by college journalists to give aspiring student journalists that platform to get experience and get clips while they were still in school. So we won the business plan competition here during our junior year, had 1 year to basically run it as students while we weren't really taking much of a risk with it yet. We still were in school, and basically see if it had legs and had enough traction. And sure enough, it did. So we started doing it full time once we graduated back in 2010. And since then, Her Campus has just continued to grow. It's now not just hercampus.com, but Her Campus Media, which we say is a multi-platform media and marketing company targeting college women. So hercampus.com is our flagship site, and that represents the #1 online community for college women, with over 6 million monthly users and chapters at over 250 colleges nationwide and in 7 different countries. But then we've also branched out from there to have annual conferences, events, and basically our business model, as Linda mentioned, we've completely bootstrapped it, so we needed revenues in the door immediately. And basically we've become a full-service college marketing firm, working with clients of ours like Intel, Merck, Chipotle, Victoria's Secret, to provide a full suite of marketing services to help them reach college women online and offline. And then most recently, we just published our first book, which is the Her Campus Guide to College Life, which hit bookstores nationwide a couple weeks ago. So we're in the midst of kind of a whole book tour and promotion and everything to promote that. So if you know any high school girls graduating, or college girls, or moms of high school or college girls, the book is absolutely perfect for them. So, and I have some with me if anyone wants to see it after.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's open it up. Who's got compelling questions that you'd like to ask one or more of our panelists today? Yes.
Maybe for each of you, like what do you think was your biggest challenge getting started? Like whether it was like coming up with the idea, or financial, or like getting support from the outside, or legal stuff, or anything like that?
Good question. Who'd like to start? Biggest challenge getting started.
So I think the biggest challenge for us was we did this directly out of undergrad. So we had literally no experience in the working world, and no business education, because Harvard is all liberal arts. So we'd never taken a finance or accounting course or marketing course, no experience of any kind. So literally every single thing in business was completely new to us, even just terminology. So I think one thing that we did was we did a really good job of networking in the beginning, to build just a network of contacts and informal advisors that we could call on when something came up that we had kind of no idea what it was or no idea what to do with. And I think it was about just kind of figuring out that balance of, in some ways our naivete was definitely helpful, because it was this kind of huge, we didn't know how much we didn't know, but when something really big came along where we could have really kind of screwed ourselves over by not asking for advice, we had built that network of contacts to have, a web advisor or a legal advisor, someone like that we could go to. At Harvard specifically, Harvard Law School has the Transactional Law Clinic, which provides free legal services to startups. So that was incredibly helpful for us, because some of the biggest things are definitely those legal things, and we definitely ran into some issues early on of not having contracts in place before we started working on something, getting excited about something before the contract was signed, and we learned those lessons pretty quickly, that you always need a contract, and don't get excited till the contract is signed.
So one of the things, just to start checking off some insights, building businesses is a team sport. And when you're building your team, you've got to bring around you the people that actually complement and bring different kinds of perspectives and access to different networks, right, that you're going to need. Whether it's access to a legal network, whether it's access to, a consumer network or a business network, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a team sport. Frequently what I see everybody doing is you bring people around you just like you. Anybody else? Biggest challenges when you were getting started?
I actually think that some of the biggest challenges when you get started can be internal, and also the sort of the conversations, the voices you have in your head. It might sound weird, but it's that self-doubt that creeps up. It's the, you talk to somebody and maybe they instill you with fear as to, they give you every reason why you possibly should not be launching a yogurt company. But I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people who constantly and remind me that it's nuts, you shouldn't start a yogurt company. The market's saturated already. It's the most valuable space in the retailer. Why would, in the retail store, in the supermarket, why would anyone give up space that Dannon has, Chobani, Yoplait to put Viking on the shelf? And actually, it's really nice when you shut all that noise out of your head and you just keep going, because you end up making it. And everyone who looked at you and said you couldn't do it, all of a sudden doesn't say those things anymore. They don't say those things anymore. We work and assemble teams all the time, and like Linda said, teams are very, very important. One of the biggest challenges, actually, I can talk about briefly. Sales also really hard, but they're how you get your product out into the market. You need sales. We had nailed a sale actually with a national retailer, and the missing piece was the distributor to transport our product into the stores. When we met with the distributor, this was the distributor the store liked to use and recommended. The distributor said, I'll only move your product if I have ownership in your company. And I looked at him, I said,
what did you say?
Absolutely not. I looked at him and said, absolutely not. This was our one sale that we had. We thought we had nailed, and we thought we could potentially be a national yogurt brand right out of the gate. And we realized we had this huge obstacle in the middle. But we stuck with our guns. We said, we're not giving up ownership in our company. That was very important between my husband and I. We decided that. And also, no one was gonna come in and dilute us and take away the vision that we had created and we had decided. So those are just some of the challenges we faced.
There's a real key point here. How do you trust your gut and engage your head? Okay, you never give up the gut, but how do you engage the head and the rational, to basically move past what everybody's telling you so that you can evaluate it and think through? What did you do to actually go through that process of saying, I can do this, my idea is different than everybody else's, so there's a reason why I'll succeed. And then, how did you come up with, by the way, never, never, ever give up equity if you can pay. Equity is dear, very dear. How did you make those two decisions? Because both of them require that you step back and think, you had a gut instinct, but then you probably had to engage your brain to come up with why you thought the way you did so you could persevere.
I think a couple of things went through my mind. Dealing with, difficult people like a bad distributor. I knew this person wasn't a good person right off the bat and not a good person to work with. So I'd rather at that point have folded as a business and said, okay, well, we tried and it didn't work, than to have worked with this person. But within myself, I knew that I wasn't going to give up. So this was just going to be one obstacle, and I was going to figure out how to get around it, and we were going to find other retailers, and we did. So it's just that perseverance, that inner strength that you have to, you sort of pull together so that you don't give up. And just because you hit, that was an early stumbling block. And if I think back, I'm like, why would I have ever thought that was going to be the end of it? Because there's just so much more now that we're in the market. There's just so much more opportunity awaiting us. And what was your second question?
The other one is, how did you know that strategy is what makes you different from everybody else, not the same? How did you know that the yogurt company you were founding was going to fill a very specific niche so that you would be able to get that space?
There was a hole in the market that we saw, and that was the fact that the Greek yogurts all have more sugar than protein. You turn the cup around, and you'll see how much sugar is in your Chobani, in your Oikos. The Faye, unless you're just eating plain yogurt and none of the fruit blended kinds. I kept hearing over and over from friends, new mothers, they don't want to feed their kids so much sugar. So we worked hard to develop a yogurt that had more protein than sugar, unlike the Greek yogurts. The Icelandics, I don't know if you're familiar with some of those brands that are on the market. We thought they were at a high price point. So what we ended up doing was working to bring the price down and make it a more affordable product. Because at the end of the day, I don't think yogurt should be a luxury, and good yogurt shouldn't be a luxury. I think it should be accessible for all.
Thank you. So, Jules or Debbie, do one of you want to talk about the biggest challenge?
Actually, you kind of touched on some of that. It's hard at the beginning to take it seriously that you're really doing it. I think it's really basic, but I can tell you how I started. It was a bit, I might call myself a reluctant entrepreneur in that it was a better term for it, actually. I learned this recently. I went to hear David Axelrod speak across the river recently. And he talked about how there are two kinds of politicians. There are politicians who want to be something, and there are politicians who want to do something. And I think entrepreneurs actually divide that way. And I don't necessarily mean it negatively that you want to be an entrepreneur. I just wasn't that person. To be an entrepreneur, there are people who just know they can't work for other people. They know they have to run their own show. That is success to them. They know it from a very young age. A lot of people will tell you that when they become entrepreneurs. That was not me. I knew I needed to make a dent in the universe, but it could have been writing a book. It could have been being an activist. It could have been a lot of things other than being an entrepreneur. So even though I joined 2 startups, there's a really big difference between joining a startup and starting a company. Really big difference. It's night and day to me in many ways. And so I had just left my startup, Ziggs, and I was thinking I was going to join another startup. And I was sitting in a venture capitalist office, and the person was running late. And I was talking to an entrepreneur, and I just vaguely described the idea of the Grommet. We were just chatting. I was saying, it's so crazy that people can make or break a movie over the weekend on Facebook, or make or break a political candidate, and we haven't really channeled that to the thing that really, really determines our world, which is the businesses we support. I knew, because business is my craft after design, that the simplest thing we ever do is what we buy or we don't buy. Those are the simplest votes we make and the most powerful ones. Somebody should do this. Somebody should organize this. Somebody should make this happen. He turned to me, this stranger, I've never seen him since, and said, you should do that. And it was so weird because I'm a really confident person, quietly confident. I don't need external validation for much to keep going. But that one was different. That his saying this, his name's Grant, he said that, meant a lot. So that weekend, I happened to be going to visit my son at college at Carnegie Mellon. Flying back, and I was reading the Alumni magazine, and it had all these profiles of entrepreneurs. And none of them were more prepared to do a business than I was. I was reading them, and they're all fumbling through like you do. And I said, okay, that's kind of a sign. And then I wrote just like when I used to do Harvard Business School cases, I wrote a plus and minus list of why I would do this and why I wouldn't. I'm still on the plane. I still have that list. And so that was basically the start. And I've chronicled a lot of this. I have a blog. If you just Google me, you'll find it. One post that might help you if you really want to know about early days is I wrote one that, when is this company real? And I just went through all the little building blocks. Like the first time I wrote the name of the company on a name tag and went to an event. No one laughed. I was like, oh, it's a company. So you can find out stuff in my blog better than I could even retell it today because it's very visceral at the time.
But I love that. Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Are you passionate about being an entrepreneur? Or are you passionate about doing something? The key is, and you're hearing it from everybody, it's passion that keeps you going, that gets you started and keeps you going. Debbie.
I think I'll talk about an obstacle that I'd be facing more recently, rather than starting in 17 years ago, whatever. That I'm trained as an engineer, and I wanted to do something. And now as an entrepreneur, my daughter asked me, "What do you do every day?" And I said, "I answer emails." And I'm like, whoa, this is a lot different. So all of a sudden I have to be like an expert on everything. Like you said, you have to find out about, HR, legal, marketing, sales, product, distribution, all of these things that some I like more than others. And I'm not, sometimes I'm not even for weeks, like touching my product or, interacting with, the frontline people who are using my product, because I'm, doing all of these other things around that. And that's a challenge, to keep your passion going and alive, and to keep your strengths at your fingertips. Part of that has been identifying things that I just don't like to do, and that I can, with full heartedness, hand off to somebody else. There are things that I don't like to do that I don't hand off because they're too important to hand off, but I definitely asked for help. And so understanding that, I was just, we have our for-profit company that I worked with for 10 years, and then started the nonprofit, which is the same but different. And in the for-profit, it was nice to, as you get customers and you build and you get bigger, then you can hire and add more people. In the nonprofit, you build and you just take on more and more, more and more weight and do more things. But to really sit back and to think about, I feel like I've gone from the startup and now I'm in a startup again, of saying, what are all the things that have to happen? What are the things that are core to our mission? I'm the one who's leading this. I'm the one who's pushing. Nobody's standing behind me and being like, Debbie, you've got to do this. You've got to set this goal, this bar higher, and all of these things. It's me that's pushing that. And so when I feel completely stressed out or overwhelmed, I have to rethink, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the resources that I have? What are the things that I can do, and only me? And what are the things that other people can do, and how can I get help to do those? And so that's been a big challenge for me just recently, and that's somewhat difficult to overcome, because again, the buck stops with me, and so I have to realize that.
That's interesting, because what you're saying is it's a marathon, not a sprint, right, Stephanie? And that the business changes as it evolves. And sometimes when you're the founder, your role has to change, and that constantly going back to, what do I do well? What do I like to do? And then, how do I continually bring that team of people around me to ensure that I have the people around me that can help take it to the next level.
Because some people really get engaged by contracts.
Oh yeah, some people do.
You can do it for me. I'll do it what I love.
Another compelling question, yes.
I'm Kitty Isaac from NPR Morning Edition, but this year as a Neiman, I'm here. But this is fascinating.
Hi, Kitty.
Hi. We created a series on changing lives of women that's still going on, and one of the things that came up a lot were financial insecurity. Not necessarily
interesting.
from entrepreneurs, but even from women who are doing well in their professions, a sort of long-range sense of, I'm not sure I can take that risk. So I want to ask how you thought about your own financial bottom line to take a risk in launching a company, or in, as you said, like knowing it would turn out.
Good
and
question.
how you would advise other people who may or may not be business grads and want to bring something out, because we've been kind of surfacing that a lot in some of our reporting.
I think this is really, really interesting, because especially with women entrepreneurs, we got 4 women up here that have all done different kinds of financing. And we're in the midst right now of doing a really big study that I'm leading at Harvard that looks at women and entrepreneurs and how they finance their businesses. So it would be interesting to hear from that. Jules, you wanted to jump in.
First piece of advice I'd have about it's not one piece I took, which is, if you are thinking about starting a business, keep your burn really low. Like, if you're in a stage of life when you can do that, do it, because you're investing in yourself. So if if you're at the younger end of life and, you know, recent graduate, it's hard because your friends are all maybe buying houses or taking vacations, and you're going to be saying, no, I'm thinking harder. Like my son started a business last year, and I didn't realize actually he was planning to, and he was living like a monk for like 3 years. The only thing he spent money on was going to fly and see his girlfriend. I mean, I'm not kidding. He wears used clothes, doesn't do much except, and sees his friends, but not much. And then he kind of popped out of the box, and now I understood why he lived like a monk for so long. And I'd never given him the advice. He just kind of figured it out. I couldn't take that advice in that my burn was already 3 children, house with a mortgage. During the time I started the company, were moving from high school into college. So I'm on I have 2 simultaneous college educations right now. And we didn't really have the savings. We had 1 kid covered. We didn't the other 2. And that was all going to be okay, except that I launched October 20th, 2008, and my husband's work dried up. So the more stable income went away for a few years, for the most part. And that was killer. That was absolutely killer. So I can't give advice about that because I wouldn't want to do that again. That was way more pain and suffering than it needed to be. The son that was at Carnegie Mellon had to get emergency financial aid to stay there. I mean, what mother wants to ask their child to go do that, right? That is not the way, that's not the contract I signed up for when I had 3 children, that they would have to do that. And the second mortgage and things like that. And it's not completely over for me because I'm still working it, but it's better. I have a real salary now. I didn't for a long time. So the compromise to no salary and the compromised salary was our existence. It was very hard. And that's not an advertisement for doing it, but it's also not 2008. I mean, it was just, we might get into that. It was just insane times to try to do what I was doing.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I remember
Yeah.
2008. Yeah, I think it hit everybody hard. I mean, I think we do profit sharing to our employees, and we had just given nice big bonuses in December of 2008, and then March of 2009 came, and we're like, we're gonna have to downsize now. Hope you saved some of your bonuses because, you know, nothing's coming through. We were in healthcare, so we're selling to large hospital systems, and their budgets just, you know, like a clamp down hard, and nobody was purchasing. So in healthcare, the sales cycles are at least 6, 9, 12 months long. You get in their budget cycles, and then they, you know, go through the whole process, and then finally you get the contract. So to have things that we were working and, you know, things in the pipeline just be shut down for probably 6 months was really hard. So I think every business kind of goes through, and I remember another one in 2001. So we had a couple of cycles coming through. We had a customer that was our cash cow that we thought would be around forever and that loved us, and then they, you know, found these Czechoslovakian software developers, and we were out the door. And so what do you do when, you know, your major your funder is then gone, and how do you recover from that? But as part of the entrepreneur spirit, you figure it out. You know, have to make tough decisions, and you are not popular. And you feel really badly for people who trusted you and put their faith in your company. But in order for you to survive and to continue on your mission, you have to make those tough calls and get yourself back in the black and figure out what your core strategy is, and to keep driving at that. But the things that we don't talk about, and maybe Jules, you have this great experience with Ziggs, is not all companies turn out okay. Not all companies work. Not all strategies are okay. And that is a real risk that you take. And, you know, you have to figure out what your level of risk is. What's your tolerance for that? Even as you're growing in your business, you start out maybe pretty safe, but you come to a point where you have to decide, am I going to take that leap? Are we going to do something that, you know, we're hoping that the contracts come in. We're hoping that, you know, the growth really happens the way that we anticipate the market to be, and you put yourself at risk. And you kind of ask, well, okay, worst case scenario, what happens? And do I have any kind of safety net? Where's my safety net, and where can we go? And you just hope for the best.
We define entrepreneurship as the relentless pursuit of opportunity without regard to the resources currently controlled. But it's not reckless. And that's a really fine line, you know, as to when you're trying to relentlessly pursue an opportunity, but you're also trying to ensure that you're not being reckless. Yeah, Therese.
I was going to speak a little bit about saving money, the importance of it if you're thinking about starting a business. I graduated from Harvard Law School, I think I mentioned in 2008, which was a bad year to graduate. But I managed to work for a large law firm in Boston. I had the opportunity for 1 year before I lost my job in 2009. And in that 1 year, I didn't know what was going to happen. I just saw that everything was drying up from banks, lending. I was a corporate lawyer. There's all these warning signs were going off in this big firm. Things like it was just downsized time. So I saved all my pennies and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I ended up actually taking a job that was probably a quarter of my salary. But I went back to Harvard and gave legal services to people who couldn't afford to start businesses because legal costs were so high. And that was my first step into the world of entrepreneurship, was giving back to the community after I was actually unemployed for almost a year. And those are hard times. I think those times really test you and try you. When you graduate from a place like this and you shake hands with now Justice Kagan and you collect your degree, and then 10 months later you're in the unemployment line. It's more to it than just unemployment. It's loss of health care, it's loss of everything. And when you kind of hit that as far as bottom as you think you can, you realize, well, actually there are the things to do. And I started to give back to the community. And then from there, I wouldn't say that was the last time I had lost a job. I worked for another company that then downsized again. So I got caught up twice. And I think after those two experiences, I said I had enough. If I was going to, I thought I had chosen a safe career path as an attorney, and there was no safety. And it was so obvious to me at that point that I no longer wanted people to define how far I could go in my career and place these boundaries around me. I'd rather go out there and see how far I can go by building a business. And I would say just, we scraped our savings together. It takes a lot of sacrifice. In the middle of this, I did get married, my husband and I. I wouldn't say we had the traditional honeymoon or anything like that. It was married and back to work. And then we moved in with family. So we stay with family between my sister and my in-laws in Chicago. So we actually got our day-to-day living expenses down really low. And that's how we were able to do everything.
Thank you. Stephanie,
Sure.
advice.
So I had the experience of starting this business while we were still students. And so basically we had won the business plan competition during the spring of our junior year. And then we had to decide, do we want to kind of pull off this crazy feat of launching this just a couple months later, or do we want to take that kind of additional year of senior year to plan and research and get everything ready and launch it when we graduate? And we decided that no, we wanted to launch it a couple months later at the start of senior year so that we would have that year where our risks were a lot lower, where we could kind of test it out while we were still students, while we would still have time to pursue other things after graduation if this didn't end up taking off. And that was a very deliberate choice because obviously otherwise if we had waited to launch it till after we graduated, one, we wouldn't have had any revenues in the door yet at that point, and we just wouldn't have known, is this something that's really not going to take off and is just going to crash and burn a few months later, and now we didn't bother finding other jobs. So we basically took that senior year to get it launched. We launched it on September 16th, 2009, and then around, I think, December, January, oops, my name tag, I'm Stephanie, at that point where there was enough traction and we had enough clients and things seemed to be picking up that we felt like we could make that commitment to do it full time. We had a solid enough idea by that point that we were going to be able to bring in enough money to at least pay the three of our, very minimal, but salaries for that next year. And so basically I think the sort of advice there that can be applied whether you're still in school or whether you have another full-time job is, if you can, try to launch something and test it out on the side rather than just jumping in and taking that huge risk. Because then if it doesn't work out, it's okay, you didn't quit your job or you didn't graduate and not find another job. And then if it is going really well, then great, you can do it when you graduate, or you can afford to quit your full-time job. And then we've had, huge, I wouldn't say, not financial challenges, but finances always have to be top of mind for us as a bootstrap company. We've never raised any money from angels or investors or VCs. Literally, we just always make sure that we bring in more money than we spend every single quarter. We've been profitable every single quarter since we launched, and that's by keeping costs extremely low, running as lean a business as possible. We had free office space here initially through winning the Harvard Business Plan competition. That was for 2 years. We then had free office space for the next 2 years by winning Mass Challenge, another business plan competition here. We took the Bolt bus every time we went to New York City for meetings. We literally ate at Arby's for our meals. We stayed with friends when we were on business trips. We never paid for a hotel. Literally didn't spend money on anything that we didn't have to, other than basic salaries for us and then for our early employees. And even now that we're obviously more comfortable financially 5 years in, we still keep that same mentality of just running as lean a business as possible. Because, like Debbie mentioned, you never know when one of your big kind of cash cow clients could pull out, or something could change, or maybe you decide you need to make a really expensive hire and you need to be prepared to do that. So we had no choice but to be extremely lean in the beginning, and now we still apply that mentality today.
Anybody else? Yes.
I just want to start off by thanking you. It's so refreshing to hear insights that really relate to what you're going through. I started an agency about 2.5 years ago, and I hear this, 3 or 5 years is the point where you, as Jules said, know that this is a real company. Like, what is the turning point? Was there an event or a partner or a deal or a hire, or what point did you realize this is a real company? It's kind of like, I feel good about it now. Was it?
So I think for us, I guess I'll talk about kind of what made us make the decision that yes, we're going to do this full time. But we had launched the company in September, and then basically in December of that year, one of the major women's magazines basically flew or trained or whatever us in to meet with them, because they'd heard about what we were doing and they wanted to kind of get the scoop, and they were very interested, and they wanted to explore some in-theory potential partnerships, really just kind of get a lot of info from us. But we just were then down in New York for this series of meetings, and it was just very clear by how interested they were and kind of how curious they were about where this was going and the kinds of things they wanted to pursue with us, that this was something real, and this was something that these major magazines were taking notice of, and that there was really something to it after kind of that series of meetings.
How long into the process?
That was 2 months after we launched.
Oh my gosh.
So for you, it was a media coverage which actually started to validate that this was a business.
It wasn't that they covered us.
Oh.
They just wanted to meet with us.
They just wanted to meet with you. So
Yeah.
that actually helped validate that you were
Exactly.
really building a business.
Exactly.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I have a really simple one. I heard through one of my investors who was a mentor at MIT in one of their entrepreneurship projects that somebody pitched her saying, well, we want to be the Grommet 4. Oh, we're real.
That's very cool. Yeah.
One of the problems,
I'm sorry. Debbie? Oh, Therese? Yeah. Debbie, go ahead.
one of the problems that we've had with this is hiring people, and I don't know if it's much different now because people are more comfortable hiring into startups. But we would have people interviewing in our business, and they're like, well, my mom says that I should really go with a real company or something. Or in real companies, they do this. With people who come to your company, you're like, we've got a certificate here. We are a real company. But when do people feel like that confidence of like you're not just winging it, from the hip, or some crazy idea that you have that they're kind of tagging along with and don't know if it's actually going to be a go or something. And so part of that is when your employees start to feel that confidence in you and reflect it back to you, that they feel like we've established something real, that the mission is real, that we've accomplished something, that we've made an impact, that they have a 401k plan, something like that. That for me feels like when you have that internal group that that is really working towards that same mission helps reflect that it's a real company at this point.
Interesting, Therese.
I think for us, it felt really real when we got our first paycheck in February. That was an amazing feeling. Actually, my husband and I went to the bank and he took a photo of me depositing it. It was that big a deal.
So these are all inflection points, real inflection points when, you've engaged, a group of, stakeholders and customers and employees, etc., and they start to really treat it like a real business. Yes, in the back.
Hi there, Alicia Stewart. I'm also a Neiman Fellow here.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi there. So, I love what she talked about, Therese, and just talking about the character that was built and this opportunity where you kind of felt like you hit rock bottom and you've found it as a way to give back. And, since this is called the Entrepreneurial Woman, I'm curious how you plan for those times and infuse in your companies the values that you're talking about in terms of whether it's preparing for that big expensive hire or preparing for that next 2008, or whatever that is, and being conscious of incorporating different experiences and different people into the companies and in the way you operate as a company. How do you think about that, if at all? And how do those values in terms of preparing for whatever it is, continuing to character build or creating this kind of world the way you see it or want to see it, how are those values?
I was just going to add to tag on to her is I didn't hear anyone say being a woman was a challenge, which is interesting, and I don't know if it's because we just sort of that's just a check that we already say.
We already know that, or
I think my answer will demonstrate some of that. So I'm taking your question a certain way that, it's so precious when you're starting out and you're so intentional about so many things, even though you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's actually pretty easy to establish kind of who you are and what your values are with a small team. It's not that challenging, frankly. You're sitting right next to them, you're doing things together, everything you think and do is fairly transparent and transferable. So we went from 4 years of pretty much survival with a relatively limited teams, about 12 people, to now we have 55. And we grew our revenues 800% in 2 years, and the team grew that in that time as well. So that's when I start worrying about it, right? And so I'm still very actively inoculating the company for preserving the things that really matter, because I don't know if we're going to go public, if we're not, what our ultimate destiny is, but it's going to be bigger. And so there are things that I've done that are quite deliberate. For instance, everybody in the company right now has a VP role that is not their job. I'm VP of garden, like outdoor garden, and I have VP of new employee gift, because we always give people a gift, and we have employee of lunch and learns, people who come in and speak. Linda did one of them for us. Employees, our VP, I'm trying to think of other ones, visitor logistics, so we have a lot of visitors, and somebody has to take care of them. We have no HR and no office manager yet. We will. We're 55 people, but we've passed the point that most people would normally do that. And it's very inefficient to distribute HR and office management across 55 people. It's a little insane, but I'm doing it on purpose because I look people in the eye and I explain why we do this, and I say, I need you to understand that you carry a piece of this culture, and so that and you're deciding this, we started out with very few of these jobs, and I did them all, frankly, in the beginning. I did them over the weekend, all these jobs, snacks and things, because I couldn't afford to pay people what they were worth. So I would just do these things personally to show, I care about you, and I know that having window boxes planted doesn't feed your children, but you're going to show up every day and it looks nice, and you're going to feel good. So I explain that to people. You're carrying that and you're deciding what these jobs are now. They're not the same jobs as when I did it. And so that when we're 200 people and somebody's trashing the carpet, and you used to be VP of carpet, we have VP of carpet, believe it or not, that you'll say, hey, come on, there's the resolve in the cabinet over there, go clean that up. And it is about saving money, but it's way more than that. So we also do other things like, every January I write a CEO letter about reflecting on our big 3 learnings last year and our big goals for this year. And then we roll that into individual and team goals. And then we meet every Friday, each manager and team member, and have what's called a sticky note. And that sticky note meeting, you know, yellow sticky notes, meant to not carry more than would fill a sticky note, because you don't want problems to grow and grow and grow and never get addressed. It's good things, it's bad things, it's prepping for the next week, but we do that. So everybody kind of aligns. And again, at 55, it's not that hard, frankly, still. It's not that hard. I don't know how many people you have, Debbie, but it's going to be hard. So I'm getting ready for it, and it's all the woman thing. I don't think these people are in place as children at all. But I do know what it's like to develop people. I do know, you know, that you can drive a 3-year-old crazy if you work on all of their terrible issues at once, right? Like, pick two. And employees, you know, somebody who's 25 can't work on the same level as somebody who's 45 and have all the same, you know, expectations. So I have this long ball approach to people in the company that was formed somewhat by being a parent, I'm quite sure.
Interesting, interesting. Anybody else? Ways that you keep the company centered around the original values, and if there's any piece that you think, you know, is really driven by being a woman entrepreneur.
So we have a policy at Vecna that 10% of paid working time of employees can be given to community service. And this is something that we've thought a lot about. It was something that we put in from the very beginning, something that we thought was important for corporations to keep a sense of giving back to communities. And at first it was kind of just all over the place, like people were on the soccer teams and the food banks, and you know, wherever it is that they wanted to pull their 4 hours from, they could use this in their timesheets to track their time. And as we got bigger and bigger, it was just unwieldy, we couldn't manage it, and so we started to consolidate and see as a company what were some of the skill sets that we had, what were some of the interests that we had that could really help us to have a bigger impact in some of the places that we wanted to have an impact as a corporation. And so something that started off is just kind of an idea of, you know, a corporation should have a social component to this, and we should be giving back. Then turned into community service missions, and so now we have technology for the future, where people can, you know, bring projects or connections or, you know, communities together and go out into K through 12 and, you know, help them with science, technology, engineering, and math, I think is what STEM stands for. And then we have healthy communities. So, you know, if we're doing local programs that really help to improve the health of people where they live and work. And then we also have an open source community effort where our developers and technologists and stuff can contribute to open source projects that are in those communities. And we also started this other global health initiative through this program. And so in starting the global health initiative, we realized that was something that really had legs and could grow. And so that's when we started our nonprofit arm. But originally we started it with people just donating their 10% of their paid working time to some of these just, you know, blue sky projects that we thought we could make an impact in a rural clinic in Kenya. And so would you be willing to design a hardware package that brings together a power inverter, a computer, a wireless router, and, you know, other electronic components into one box, so that people don't have to go through the hassle of maintaining that in these rural clinics where there's no IT expertise. So people donated their time and their effort and all this to create this product. And then, you know, transitioning our software products into something that's a lightweight, easy to use electronic medical record, and they donated that as well. And so out of that grew this nonprofit initiative, and now we've put in place some things within our company organization. Now we have an agreement between Vecna and Vecna Cares that kind of codifies what we're actually trying to do and what our commitments are on each side, but also into the bylines of our corporation to say, no, this is a really valuable thing that we want to make sure outlasts me or anybody else in the leadership and can continue on as part of our identity as a corporation. So I think back to, you know, when we had 25 people, and it was a really fun time, and it was really great, and everybody had like the same culture and feel. And then as you grow, we have about 300 employees now, really boiling those down to what are the things that are going to continue, and how do I make that what are the methods? You don't have to just put it in your bylines. There's a lot of different ways that you can instill this and carry it on. And in fact, if you're organizing a corporation now and you're interested in that social component, you can organize as a B Corp. So there's a whole nother organization standard that you can put in place of that wasn't there when we started. But there are other ways that you can, the VPs of these various tasks, put them into your business, and so they don't leave, and people know what they are, and they kind of propagate a culture and an idea all the way through the rest of your company.
Anybody else? I'd like each one of you to address whether there's any, as you were starting and building your company, did you ever find that there were some specific challenges that you think women entrepreneurs face that, are not, what we usually hear about as, the kinds of things that entrepreneurs face in more general terms? Anybody? Come on, Debbie, you look like you got one.
Getting pregnant is a real barrier.
What was that?
Getting pregnant, having kids, you just don't stop for having kids. So, and things are a lot better, easier, more accepted now, but I can remember driving down the street in my car with my young children, and I'm not going to make it home for the conference call, and so I have to pull over into the parking lot of a high school and bribe my kids to stay in the car and be quiet and good while I walk around taking a conference call on my cell phone. And it was pretty glamorous, let me tell you. As far as you think of the CEO life, and it is not glamorous at all, and the grunt work and the shuffling and the chaos and the mayhem that you have to go through to juggle all these things together is just it's better left under the rug. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, or if you think am I the only one, but it definitely is. It's more of a crazy life, because as the boss, as the entrepreneur, the buck stops with you and you're on call all the time. And so, drawing those boundaries is really important. So the things that are really important, you put on the calendar and you don't let anyone schedule over. But when push comes to shove, you have to take the call, and you have to be at that meeting. And so how do you balance that out? Having a good partner certainly helps a lot.
Interesting. Anybody else? Challenges that you think were,
I don't know if this is necessarily a gender issue. It's more probably age and experience. I know you talked a bit about that too. When you start something new, like a yogurt business, and you have no experience in manufacturing yogurt, there's a huge learning curve. And I think it is difficult at times for people to take your abilities seriously. I know I mentioned this distributor, I'll mention it one more time, but when I asked to review the contract for the potential relationship, I was told no, because I wouldn't understand it. And I kept my mouth shut that I had gone to law school and I had practiced law for a few years, but sort of left it as that. And I actually have found being a woman to be a very powerful experience in launching a business, particularly with supermarkets and retailers. They want to work with community businesses. I'm also Hispanic in background, and my mom was born and raised in Cuba. And so this is also a very important part of a community business, is encouraging women and minority businesses, and supermarkets in particular really enjoy working with small retailers, small vendors like me and my husband because of that.
Interesting. Stephanie, any?
Sure. So I think, for us, we started this company, thank you, at Harvard, and I think at the time when we were just getting started, a lot of people viewed our ideas kind of fluffy. We weren't tackling any kind of serious world problems. This wasn't finance, this wasn't consulting, and at Harvard, those are the kinds of things that are respected and that most people go into. So I think in the beginning, a lot of people didn't take our company very seriously and didn't think this was going to take off, let alone be a profitable, viable business. And that never bothered us at all because we had faith in what we were doing and we saw the opportunity there. But I think there was definitely this change of opinion among kind of our peers from when we were just getting started and telling people about the idea, and you could tell they didn't really think there was much to it, to when they look at us now, and we're obviously doing really well. So I think that was something, partially because we were women and we were pursuing a very female idea that related to fashion and lifestyle and magazines and all these things. People didn't necessarily view it as a serious business, but we proved them wrong. So.
Yes.
All of you are from very different business angles, and I would like to ask if each of you could say, if you were to advise someone who has a new idea, what would be the first 3 things you would advise to do?
Okay.
Whether it be contact a lawyer or mentors or companies. I mean, I'm just assuming you have 50 women here, and if 50 women have ideas and nobody knows how to start because maybe some came from different walks of life and have never done business, what would you each say?
That's great, because that was going to be my, closing, but we'll do it now because I also wanted to have time after they gave their advice to get a couple more questions in. So, advice.
My
First
two things would be to find co-founders. I think having co-founders is hugely important, both from a morale perspective, from a skills perspective, and from a time perspective. You need other people in there with you. So find co-founders whose skills complement yours and who you like spending time with. And then my second one would be to enter a business plan competition. I think that's one way to just force yourself to give yourself kind of a deadline for fleshing out your ideas. And at least in the case of most business plan competitions, they provide you with these templates for building out that business plan. So if you're really at square one, I think forcing yourself through that competition of having the deadlines and having the template just forces you to figure out what is this kind of vague idea that you're thinking about and put something down on paper, but you need co-founders to do it with.
I totally agree with the co-founder idea. A lot of women start alone, and I think it's partly self-doubt that they don't want to drag someone else into their potential mess. And it's one of the most essential skills of a founder to be able to convince people to follow you, whether it's investors, whether it's customers, whether it's board, and especially employees or co-founders. And so I would emphasize that 1, 2, and 3. But I would back up from your question a little bit, because I advise students here twice a month. I come and talk to teams, startup teams or individuals, and most of them are from the business school, but they can be from anywhere across the campus. But the business school ones all have the same 2 questions. One is, am I cut out to be a founder? And is my idea the right idea? Should I jump ship or not take the job to do this idea? And on the idea one, that's where I'm backing up from your question, is that I always tell people, make sure it's big enough. Because here's why. First of all, at Grommet, we look at 300 ideas a week and launch 6. So I'm looking at, our team particularly, is looking at a lot of ideas. And I want to cry when I see somebody pursuing an idea that's a really tiny, tiny idea. And it's not a lifestyle business for them. This is, they're going for it. And there's not enough market potential. Because you only get one life, right? And you want a very large target market and a place where you can have more than one shot on goal, because your first shot's not going to hit the mark. So you want a lot of there. And I also see women kind of containing their ideas. They think that if it's smaller, it'll be easier, and a small business is just as hard as a big business. Mm-hmm. So go for the big one. Don't contain yourself. Go for the absolute opposite of that.
Excellent. Somebody else. Debbie. Advice.
Yeah, advice. I think that was a great advice. You should listen to Jules.
Listen to Jules is her advice. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, it's almost like to say, would you buy it? Are you meeting a big enough need? Is this to look at your market and to see how that is? And is this something that you're going to be interested in, in a year, in 2 years, or what is your goal of starting the business? Is this to create a platform to launch lots of toys or products or other things? Is this, a one a one thing that can grow into something bigger? Is this something that you want to do really fast and then sell? Is this something that you want to, build forever? Is it something that you want to have local and be deep, or do you want it to also go wide? And so to kind of understand what your investment is. It used to really bother me when people would ask us about our exit strategy. What's your exit strategy for the business? And we didn't have one. We don't have one. We built the company in order to, advance technology and to do some good in healthcare. It's a very big mission statement. We would never win a business plan competition. But a lot of people do have that exit strategy, that I want to do this, and in 3 years I want to be at a certain point, and then here's our goal, and here we want to get to, and here we want to sell. So you have to kind of walk into it knowing kind of what you're willing to give to it, and what you expect to to get out of it as well. So if you know what those things are, then it'll be a lot easier to kind of take the shocks and to revise that plan when things don't necessarily go according to it.
Good. Therese?
I think one piece of advice is embrace the fact that you may not know how to start your company. That sounds weird, but we work actually with a fruit company that prepares the fruit for yogurt all across this nation. And we call her the yogurt mom or the yogurt guru. She's also a sounding board for us. But one day, day to day, you usually don't get a lot of feedback when you're just two people working on a company. And she actually stepped back and said, I'm proud of you guys because I've seen people leave companies like Chobani, Stonyfield, on, try to start their own yogurt companies and fail. And you guys have gone farther than any of those other ones trying to launch. And the reason that I can think of is why that is because you don't know how this business works. And so she's like, you do it your own way, and you just figure it out as you go. And so use that to your advantage, and you'll come ahead. Because there are other people doing things over and over and over again, and you may just happen to figure out a new way of doing it. I think the other thing, too, we experienced is we tried to sell in the Northeast, in Boston, New York. When that didn't work out, we weren't able to find open doors. We shifted. So be flexible. Don't think just because you don't get into Whole Foods, your health product or whatever you're thinking of is a failure. That was another piece of advice actually, and she said, I know a lot of people who didn't get Whole Foods and they fold, and she said, you guys kept going. Like the supermarkets you're talking about, I couldn't believe that you guys were looking at these supermarkets like Schnucks, Mariano's, out in the Midwest, but that's great because they're big and they've got a lot of stores. So just because you don't get that one sale or whatever, don't worry about it. There are other other people out there. There are other cities. If New York is close to you, go to Chicago. Go to St. Louis. Be flexible.
That's called pivoting. We talk about it where you set up a kind of an experiment for where you're going to go, and you know that if that's not working, can I pivot? Can I do something a little different and try another route? That's what's called pivoting. We always say that there's no such thing as failure, it's learning. And the key is keep the tuition low. Anybody else?
Linda, I do want to address one topic.
Go ahead.
About age,
Yeah.
starting a company. The average age to start a company is 45, which isn't what you'd necessarily
Oh,
think
that's very interesting.
from the
Yeah.
media. I was 47 when I started this company. I want to talk about that because I think that was a huge strength, and there were the obvious reasons, right? I have a huge network. I didn't have money, as you learned earlier, but I did have people to draw. I had a reputation. Those things helped a lot. I had experience, decisive, confident, move fast. All those things do get better with age. But that's not really the reason I wanted to highlight age. And it's not about being a woman either. It's that Janet Krause, who's one of Linda's colleagues, crystallized this for me because she's a serial entrepreneur, 3 startups under her belt. She did one when she was single, one when she was married, and one with children. And she actually said the one with the children has been the easiest because when she was single and just married, she was establishing her life. And she had a lot of other big projects in her life, finding a partner, self-definition, building a home, then eventually having children. She sort of handled a lot of those things already. And her children are younger than mine than when I started mine. I would even push it further because there are a lot of you who are closer to my age in the room, or you're young and you're not ready to start a company. You're worried if you don't start now, you'll never get a chance. You will. Because for me, having older children was brilliant. It was wonderful because they don't want you in their face every minute, right? And I had already paid my dues, like we had it down, who we were as mom and son, right? I wasn't worried that, if I'd screwed up, it already happened, basically. So I could just do my job, and it became actually a really big part of their self-identity. Not initially, mom was doing a weird project. But now, it's really great, because their friends want to work for my company. That makes them feel so good, right? So don't think it's over because you're not doing it by the time you're 40. You've got a lot of time still.
That's very cool. Yes, you've been trying to get in. Yes.
You guys have told me about the importance of co-founder, but eventually you have to have a teams. And when you choose the teams, what would be the most important things? Somebody was talking about the culture that you're creating. How do you choose the team members? How did you?
And one of those questions might have to do, how do you build if you don't have a relationship, how do you build a relationship and gain the trust? Yeah, go ahead. Anybody want to take that one?
Sure.
Go for it.
Two of our very first employees who are now still here 4 years later, Brittany and Chelsea, are here in the audience today. But I think finding the right employees is really one of the most important things that you do, because obviously there's only so much you can get done among you and your co-founders, just the 3 of you. If you want to get bigger, you need to bring on more people. And I think one of the very most important things is that those people you bring on have passion for your business and for its mission. They're not just looking for a job or interested in that particular function of the job, but they actually care about your company and feel passionate about the work that you're doing. And I think that's true especially in the beginning, because often what that person's role is could end up changing soon after they come on board, because in those early stages you might bring them on to do one thing and then realize a few months later you need them to do something else. Chelsea, for example, who's here, has been in, I think, at least 3 completely different roles over these 4 years that she's been working with us. And so I think another thing that leads me to is, especially in those early hires that you make, it needs to be people who are flexible and who are adaptable and who don't say, no, you hired me to do marketing, I'm only going to do marketing. If you need them to do, operations or do sales or whatever else it's going to be, they need to be willing to do that. One of our other very first hires was an account manager. While one of my co-founders was heading up sales, we hired someone to head up the account management side of things. But about a month or 2 after we started, we realized that we really needed her help on the sales side as well, because there just wasn't enough business coming in. So we said to her, we know we hired you as an account manager, but we need you to do sales. And she figured it out, and she became one of our very top salespeople. And so you need people that are passionate about your company, that are going to be flexible and adaptable, and people that are just really, really hard workers. My co-founders and I don't like to micromanage, and we also don't have time to micromanage. So you need people that are going to just be able to be kind of very autonomous, very self-motivated and driven, and just figure out what they need to do to get their job done and not have their hand held every step of the way, because you just have no time to be kind of hand-holding your employees, because everyone just needs so much. There's just so much for everyone to do. So I would say, passion, flexibility, and just a really incredible work ethic.
Anybody else have a different kind of spin on that, or a different spin on how you got your first employees? Or did we cover it? Stephanie did a great job. Another question. Yes. Yes, you.
Yeah. Therese, I'm curious how you funded your startup.
Yeah, let's go through all of you. Tell how you financed it, because it's not the VC, the traditional model that we always see. Therese.
to launch in order to be able to buy packaging and things like that. Personal savings. My husband and I just pulled everything together. And then moving forward, we basically just have tight terms. So we have to get paid first so that we can pay everybody else. So our retailers need to be able to pay us, our distributor needs to be able to pay us so that we can turn around and pay everyone else who's involved in the logistics.
Now, you're thinking of pivoting to some higher growth and thinking about some other options for financing. You might want to share those.
Sure. So if we land, say, a national retailer, to scale up to that, we would do a SBA loan, Small Business Administration loan. It's actually how the founder of Giovanni launched. Giovanni was through SBA and not through private equity or angel or anything like that. So
Financing, Jules.
So our business is complex operationally. We have to maintain a community, a media company. The story has to get out every day, and their e-commerce operations. So it was actually never one that you could very easily bootstrap. And my intention was, when we started in 2008, was to raise up to about $1 million in angel funding, and I raised fairly quickly, $350,000 for my business school classmates, and then basically the doors of capital just completely slammed shut. The economy crashed, and I had a choice to give back the money. We were, I'd barely touched it, or keep going, and I was crazy enough. Honestly naive enough to keep going, and so that plan of $1 million, and then very conventional plan to raise $5 million in VC Next didn't work out. I went from that $350 to $4.4 million in angel funding, which is an insane amount of angel funding. It's very difficult. 35 different angel investors, and I had great ones. Peter Lynch, some of you will recognize the name, was one of my co-leads on it, and the other was Jill Priato, who was the second investor on Zipcar. But VC funding just did not work out for us during that time, and that's a long saga to talk about that. Ultimately, I have a picture of some shoes of mine that I wore literally out raising money. I was walking between two VCs in Kendall Square. My shoes just started disintegrating under my feet. I kept the picture, but I ended up figuratively walking to Tokyo to raise money. I raised money from Rakuten, which is the third largest e-commerce company in the world. And they did first a Series B, which would have been what the VCs would have done, and then they took a majority stake in the company. And now Linda is the next character in my financing. I'll tell you why. This woman, she comes in, she studies my company, write a case about it. She gets very intimate. She understands very well our opportunity, and then she tells me this thing that I wish almost she never told me because it was so right, and I knew it immediately. She said, "Jules, I'm worried about you in this Rakuten situation. They're a wonderful company, you're loving it for the first time, you're not starving, you can do what you need to do, but I'm worried about you. In this context of a larger company, I'm worried that they're gonna slow your momentum, and these things have momentum. I think you need to pull this company back out on the open ocean." So I'm actually doing that right now. I'm raising a growth around $15 to $20 million. It's her fault.
Debbie.
Wow. So we started with the customer, and so and we did something that we that wasn't our ideal. So we did software instead of robotics to start off with. So that was an early pivot, or a stepping stone into what we were going to do. So that was a decision that we made very deliberately until we had money to invest in capital for more of the manufacturing and prototyping for robotics. We also used SBIR funding. So we have received over $11 million now in small business innovative research grants. And there are some drawbacks to using this. They are difficult to get, especially now. They take a long time. So it could be 6 months, 9 months, a year until you get $150,000. And then you have to go for your phase 2 after another 6 months. And so it's pretty intensive as far as time. There are some big opportunities from that. So if you have a really good idea, you could get up to $3 million in funding on those. I'm not sure what is more time intensive, pitching VCs and angels, or writing an SBR, writing massive SBR grants. At this time, I'm not completely convinced on either one, or how long it could take. But that was a really great one for us, and I think being a technology company, there's a lot of doors open for us in that area. But I think there are a lot of ideas that do get launched with an SBIR grant, and luckily that program is still going on.
So we're gonna take Stephanie, and then we're gonna shut down, and there'll be places, you'll be able to get some refreshments and continue informal discussion. Stephanie, financing.
So as I mentioned, we completely bootstrapped the company. We never took on any funding from anyone. We did win a $50,000 cash grant through winning Mass Challenge. So if any of you are thinking of starting a business, I would definitely encourage you to apply to Mass Challenge, because it's one of the only business plan competitions that doesn't take any kind of equity stake and gives out pure cash grants. But other than that, we just made sure we had more money coming in than going out, and we were profitable even before we launched the site. Our initial startup costs were literally just filing for an LLC and buying up domain names and basic web hosting, so maybe at most $1,000. And our first client was Juicy Couture. They signed on to be our launch sponsor. I think they paid like $2,500 or something like that. But that check came in before we'd even launched the site, and since then, we've always been profitable.
Super, thank you.